Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today we'll be looking at victimology chapter 1. Now, victimology is the study of kind of what leads to victimization, the consequences victimization has on victims, as well as how the criminal justice system kind of assists victims as well. It also looks at how other elements of society, as in like media, TV shows, comment sections, stuff like that, kind of portray victims and whatnot. And yeah, so first, this chapter kind of dug into the history of victimization, kind of looking at first an eye for an eye, where a victim has to pay through retribution, as in like giving the thing they stole back as well as an additional thing as well. Then it kind of got to where later post-industrial revolution, where it started to become a crime against the state and kind of pushed away the victim. And then post-1940s, where researchers started looking at how victims play their own role in their own victimization. That leads us to the victim's role in crimes, starting with victim precipitation, which is kind of looks at how a victim is responsible for their own victimization. Then we go to victim facilitation, which is where a victim kind of leads to their own victimization and how they make it easier for an offender to victimize them. Kind of like leaving your keys in a car and then going inside. It just makes it very easy for an offender to go steal your car. So that's a good example of that one. And then victim provocation, when you do something that kind of leads to another person to commit an normally illegal act on you. For example, if I was to go rob somebody's house and I was to be assaulted, that would be my fault. And I would not be a victim in that situation because I did something. Next, this chapter kind of dives into the few people who created some victim typologies. Hans von Venting believed that people could be placed into one of 13 categories. Some of these categories included being young, an immigrant, depressed, or even a minority. Those are just a few of the 13. Then we dive into the father of victimology, who was Benjamin Middleson, and then Stephen Schaeffer as well created some victim typologies. Next, we get to Marvin Wolfgang, who looked at some studies of homicides in Philadelphia over a 4-year stretch. And he found that 26% of these homicides were victim precipitated. He determined in these victim precipitated homicides that most involved male offenders, the victims were previous aggressors or had a violent offending history. Alcohol was normally involved, and the victims were also typically male. Next, this chapter kind of gets into the discussion of rape and how Menachem Amir kind of labeled 1 of 5 rapes as victim precipitated. This could include a woman using seductive language or like cues, wearing revealing clothing, alcohol being involved, using risky language, and having a bad reputation in general. This chapter then gets into the victims' rights movement, starting with the women's movement, kind of that looked at how victims can suffer emotional and mental damage from these crimes, and then the civil rights movement, which kind of looked at how both the offender and the victim are mistreated by the criminal justice system. As well, it also started looking at secondary victims. These are like family members and friends of victims that were either harmed or killed. This chapter wraps up by talking about victimology today. It talks about how the National Crime Victimization Survey is a place where a lot of victims go report what had happened to them. Now, there's still a lot of people that don't use that though, and this stems from a distrust of police, as well as people not wanting to go through the whole process. They're kind of scared of it, and as well as they kind of start to feel like a witness instead of feeling like an actual victim when they do stuff like that. And another big thing that victimology highlights is the routine activities theory, as well as how risky lifestyle theory kind of plays a big part in how victims, kind of cause their own victimization. As an overview, chapter 1 is really just stating what victimology is, kind of the history of victimology, the people who influenced it, and as well as what victimology is kind of like today. And that is chapter 1.